Hey, it's Sue, and today I'm going to be drawing the Ninja Turtles in the most scary way I can. We'll see if that's even possible. On that note, let's get right into it. So, taking inspiration from a scene from, I believe it was Insane on the Mama Train, from Rise Season 2, when they were wearing their red masks after getting, Hamato training from Splinter, where they split the characters up into 4 different frames, and it was headshots with, the white eyes. I figured that was the best way to make them look kind of intimidating, since with my kind of more simplified art style, it might be the easiest way. I was teaching my little sisters how to draw this with me while I was drawing it, so there was a lot of footage I had to edit out when I just paused because I was helping them with something. Most of it they did themselves, but it did help them a little bit. I will put up their pictures on screen because they are quite good for their age, and I quite like them. So right now you are watching me do the rough sketch. I usually do the sketches, like my first sketch in a color, and then I'll slowly make it darker until we get to black, and that just gives me a certain number of sketch layers to do, and it helps me be more gradual with my sketches instead of skipping straight from the first sketch to the line art, which often makes my finished product looked a little more sloppy and not quite as polished. Instead of using a red for the whole piece like I usually do, I decided to color code the Ninja Turtles since I figured it'd help me tell them apart and know which lines go to which Ninja Turtle instead of having to deal with everyone being the same red. Even though I still would be able to tell them apart, it was easier to make sure I knew what lines went to which Ninja Turtle. I also was getting the absolute heck confused out of me while drawing Donnie, so I had to draw the bottom of his head, even though I didn't end up having to tweak anything except for the height of the eyeball. I did accidentally forget his eyebrows, even though that's the main focal point of his design, basically, other than his goggles and purple mask. So it was quite shocking that I forgot that. Thank you to my little sister for pointing this out, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have noticed for quite a while longer, and I'm glad she pointed it out while I was still in the sketching phase. So yay. So in this first sketch phase, I was just focused on getting the heads in and the eyeballs. I did do Donnie's goggles since that felt like a pretty big focal point in getting the perspective of the head portrayed in the sketch, but I wasn't worried about putting their mask in or really conveying expressions yet. I figured I'd do that in the second sketch layer. I also feel like I included a lot of Mikey in this picture, and I feel like it could have been dialed down a little bit and you could have seen less of him, and that would have made a little bit more sense with how much is showing of the rest of them, but I still like the way this picture turned out, and I'm not gonna complain. So here I believe is where I merged all my layers and then moved on to the line art phase. I started by outlining all of the little line panel thingies, whatever you'd call them in this scenario since they're not really comic panels. And I used a ruler to do this so they could actually be straight. When I was doing this second sketch, my little sisters were doing the line art of their pictures, so I did have the problem of not knowing how to occupy them while I was doing the line art. I also did flip the canvas because I wanted to make sure nothing was lopsided, even though it looks pretty good in this particular attempt, I guess. I don't know what I'm trying to say anymore. It doesn't look that off balance, is what I'm trying to say, I think. But I did put the mask in, and when my little sister saw, or one of them saw that I had flipped the canvas, they're like, how did yours end up being the exact opposite of mine when you were showing me how to do it? And I thought they were exactly the same. And at one point I start clicking the canvas back and forth super duper fast to show her what happened, and it's quite kind of dizzying because of how fast it happens in the time lapse. But I did move on to Donnie's second sketch layer. It's still just the second sketch layer, even though it's for Donnie now. When showing my little sisters how to, I feel like a lot of this is just going to be explaining when I was showing my little sister stuff. But when showing my little sisters how to do the mask, for some reason, one of them decided that even though we're working on Raph's mask right now, let's go ahead and do Donnie's. Thankfully, she actually did it exactly how it needed to be, because if they don't get it how they would like it to be, or closer to mine, they can get really upset. And if they draw super hard, I cannot seem to get them to draw lightly, no matter what I say. So they would be very upset and devastated if they quote unquote ruin their picture by drawing something the way they didn't actually want it to be. They expect me to know how to fix all of their problems. I really don't, but I love them either way. Here I moved on to Leo. Leo definitely had a little bit more detail I had to add in the second sketch layer, because he had his mask and his eye banana marking whatchamacallits. I really don't know what to call them. We're just gonna call them eye banana. Oh, I hit my mic. We're just gonna call them eye bananas because that sounds right. I also enlarged all of Leo's features. I feel like I need to do a study of Leo's head, because I can never get it to look quite right when I'm drawing his like full bodies and stuff. I need to know how to do his features when they're smaller and not quite so large. You know, I guess that's the definition of smaller, but you know what I mean, I'm assuming. For Mikey, I also had a little bit more to do than with like Raph and Donnie, because I had to draw his little tail things in. I actually do end up putting Raph's tail things in because I feel like it needed something to fill that little space on the right there. It's the right? Yeah, it's right. I don't know why I keep second guessing myself on that. I know I'm right. I feel like I'm not pushing the expressions as hard as I should be in this illustration, just because I was shying away from like adding like crinkles in their mask, or like wrinkles between their eyebrows, brow bones, I guess that's what you would call it. Wrinkles in their skin between their brow bones, because I just don't normally do that, and I kind of spaced it too. Like I wasn't really thinking I needed to do it. But in the end, I do end up going back when I realize they're not quite looking as intimidating as I would like them to be. I do feel like the background and color helped a lot with that, but I constantly had to make the colors darker because they were always too bright. My style typically consists of some bright, happy colors with like purple shading and warm lighting and all that stuff, even though like my favorite time of the day is actually, well, it's not day. My favorite time is pretty much night. I like staying up late, not necessarily getting up early, I guess, and I really like the way dusk looks. So the fact that I've taught myself how to shade mostly with warm colors instead of cool colors like it normally is in night is kind of annoying, because I would like to know how to do that. And I guess it wouldn't be as hard, but it's not the same, and therefore it's difficult. Anyway, ignoring that little tangent here I am doing the line art, and as I said, I had to find a way to occupy my little sisters while doing this, because they had already done line art, since they don't do a second sketch layer since they were drawing traditionally. So I had to find a way to occupy them, and my solution was have them pick out all the colors, and they were constantly arguing basically over who was getting what color. Like, for example, one of them actually found the perfect color for Mikey, or at least the perfectest color you could get with the limited supply of colored pencils they had. And then the other one was like, but how am I supposed to find that color? What if there's not another one? And it took me quite a while to convince them that they could just share, and it was quite an annoying experience, honestly. Another problem I had while teaching them how to do it was shading. With this picture, instead of using layer modes like I usually do, like add glow and multiply, I just decided to use a darker color and white for the highlights. So I just added another layer and was just using a darker version of the color to do it. They don't quite look very intimidating here. I do end up adding the background, and that helps a lot, and I'm tweaking it a lot in this, like in the later stages, and it definitely helps it, and I do quite like how this picture turned out. I never ended up flipping the canvas though back to how it originally was, and I'm not upset about that, but it did confuse my little sisters because they were not drawing in that same way. When I was trying to show them the shading, they were always doing it on the opposite side. Like, I showed them what side they were putting it on to be the same as mine in their pictures, but then they'd go to put their next shading in when I was doing mine, and they'd put it on the opposite side because it was the opposite side on mine technically, and then it just was completely messed up, and I had to constantly keep helping them because they weren't doing it quite right, and I knew that if I didn't help them I would be completely annoyed by how their shading was working, because it doesn't actually work that way, at least not the way I know it to work. I feel like another thing that definitely brought this piece together in the end was how much shading I used. Like right now it's just really simple, not much at all, but then in the later stages I add a lot more after I like add expressions to them and like define the forms a lot more, and I feel like it definitely helps. And you can watch me be lazy right here, and instead of erasing that dot I just colored over it. For some reason I thought that'd be easier. I don't know why my brain works like that. But at this point I was nearly done with the shading, and then I could move on to the background. I was not happy with the background a lot at one when I do it, like it is like not how I want it, but I decided to just move on to the highlights because I figured that would be easier, since I didn't know what I was going to do with the background, and I was constantly looking through the asset library on IBIS Paint to see if I could find anything. I didn't find anything I exactly wanted, so I ended up just moving to something else I made, which I was significantly happier with. Here, I can see I attempted to just add a black drop shadow around them. I did not like that because they definitely looked a little bit more intimidating, but not to the standard I wanted them to be intimidating in. So then I decided to get rid of all of that and try something else. That was not it either. I didn't want to exactly use black because then their line art wouldn't show, and I didn't want their line art to be white because that would just make them stand out too much. And I figured if I made them a darker version of the colors or that the line art was corresponding with, it would just make them, have a very soft look to them, and that is not what I wanted. I wanted the hard edge of the black line art and the impact of it. I also was erasing, instead of adding white to the colors, I was erasing white or the black background, and that definitely complicated things later when I was trying to I hit my mic again when I was trying to do things later. So here I was looking at a picture of Leo during that scene I talked about in Insane on the Mama Train. I believe it was Insane on the Mama Train, I don't really know, but I was looking at a reference of Leo from that scene, and I could not figure out how to replicate that background exactly how I wanted it to be. It was like a gradient from black to gray to white, but the black was mainly at the top, so when I was doing it I was trying to put the black at the top of each of their little frames, but that just didn't look right. Here I went to filters and played with the brightness of the colors, and I definitely think that it may have made it blend into the background more, but it definitely gave them more of an intimidating look. And when I put their eyes back to a super bright white, they definitely look quite a little bit more like you would see them when they're just basically shadows with the glowing eyes in 2012, and I believe they did it a couple times in Rise. I'm not entirely sure, but I did see this in 2012 and I thought it was kind of cool. I feel a lot in 2012 they kind of messed up the intimidating scenes just because they give them this cool red lighting and the white eyes, and they look really cool, but then they take it away a second later, and I realize it's probably a little difficult to animate, but you took away their intimidating lighting and it just doesn't feel quite as epic and exciting as it would if you kept that lighting. And I just feel like they missed out on a lot of chances doing that. Here is where I went back and finally did my final background. I just ended up doing black on both on the top left corner and the bottom right corner, and then put a gray in the middle, and I think that worked. And then I moved to put the white in the coloring, and I tried just bucketing it there. It wasn't really working. So I moved with the background on and tried to put it in there, but for some reason I didn't think I could use the bucket because of the texture of the airbrush tool I used to fill the background in. So I was trying to do it by hand, and it was quite difficult, and I could not get it in the right way, and then I ended up trying the paper bucket tool, and it just like worked basically perfectly, and I realized I wasted a bunch of time doing that. But then I moved on to the rest of the highlights, and I quite enjoyed adding these bright white highlights. I don't normally do stuff like this. I do it a little bit in the comic because all the shading is done like on the same layer with the coloring, and it is a little bit inconvenient for me. Oh, wait, we just got a sudden change of orientation. That is because I came back the next day for this, and I hadn't looked back at the footage, and I didn't realize that my tablet was being held horizontal or landscape and not vertical or portrait, so it was completely different. But here I tried to give them actual expressions now, and I definitely think this helped so much, especially when I add the shading and define the form so much more. It just made such a difference. I do think I could have pushed it a little bit more for Donnie, but I did my best, I guess. I do make Donnie's eyebrows thicker later because I felt like they were kind of thin for someone who makes such a pronounced statement with the eyebrows, and they suit him, so I'm not gonna judge him, but like I definitely feel like they were a little thin. They're still kind of like thin. I shy away from doing the thick eyebrows because typically when I'm drawing characters they have really thin eyebrows because that's just how I work. No, that's just how I do things. I did have to fix a lot of the coloring, and I nearly forgot to do the coloring on Raph's other eye. Like, I totally skipped it. Thankfully, I went back to edit, like, the shading, and then I realized I'd missed it. But if I had not done that, I probably would have totally forgotten. I also left, like, random dots all over, like, the background of this illustration by Mikey, especially. And I think I need to go back and fix that, because they're there, and they're still annoying me, and I have not fixed that yet. And I really need to. Here I played around with the filters a lot, and I saw that if I turned it completely black and just left like the shading as the coloring instead of the other way around, it looked a lot like definitely more intimidating. It kind of made them blend into the background more. So when I went back and made more shading to kind of make them stand out a little bit more and show more of them, I ended up liking the shading a lot more than just turning them completely black with a couple bits of color here and there, that I ended up just keeping it like this. And I don't normally do super intense shading, so this was definitely a fun experience and different from what I usually do, and I quite enjoyed it. Somehow, how did I not notice these dots right there? They're right there! Fix them, please! I don't know why I'm begging my past self. I'm not gonna do it. I know it. I'll just have to go back and fix those because they're quite annoying. I had a lot of fun doing the shading, and I definitely think it added a lot to the picture. So, yeah, there's that. Was just finishing up the shading on Leo, and then I moved to Raph. I still think I could have gone a little bit more, or no, I didn't move to Raph, I moved to Donnie. I still think I could have gone a little bit more intense on the expression with Donnie. I feel like because of the eyebrow, I just felt like I didn't need to add like the eyelid and the wrinkles between like the skin and stuff, because I just felt like he didn't need it, because I don't normally put that on people in my art when they have eyebrows, so I just felt like I didn't need to do it, but I definitely think it could have added to the picture if I'd done it correctly. I did end up darkening the shadows on Raph because they weren't as dark as everybody else's, and that just, I wanted it to feel cohesive with the rest of the picture, so I went to do that. A lot of thudding. I don't know if you can hear it. Here is the finished picture though. I quite enjoyed making it, and it was a lot of fun. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and I guess I'll see you all in my next video. I mean, if you decide to join me. I hope you will. Bye!